Hey guys, it's Will from the Game Lounge, and today I'm taking a look at the R36S, a $40, yes, $40 handheld system. Now, taking a look at the box, it's pretty generic. This is unbranded, but fairly straightforward in terms of what you get. Obviously, you get the console here. You can see it's pretty sleek. It comes with your standard 4-button configuration, and importantly, it's the D-pad feels a little stiff when you first test this one out, and also at the back you can hear this is very clicky for shoulder buttons, but more importantly it does for $40 come with dual analog stick, and I think this is one of the most important features that we're going to be talking about with this device. Aside from that, it's pretty standard affair here. We've got the volume buttons on one side, you've got a headphone jack in here, obviously you've got two SD card slots, one for the system, which it comes with, and one for the ROMs, which is all very standard nowadays. These are just cheap, generic. But overall, I mean, the build quality feels, for $40, it feels pretty solid. Let's compare it with what I consider the competition on the market. Now you can see here we have the Anbernic RG35XX and the Mayu Mini, both of which don't have twin analogs. It's a fair bit taller, but that feels pretty good in the hands, to be honest, when you have a look at it. Also, the chipset, that it's the RG351MP, which it shares the same chipset and the original Mayu Mini. You can see it's a very similar size when you pick this up, but like I say, the slightly longer feel, it feels much better in the hands and is a great size when compared to the competition. Taking a look at the stock firmware, and if you've seen my videos in the past, you know I'm not a fan of using out-of-the-box firmware and game configuration. It claims to have 15,000 games. You're going to spend more time browsing the lists than actually playing them. You can see actually this is an Arc OS build, but it's actually a build from April 2022. So there's been a lot more updates. So the first thing that I recommend you do with any of these devices is just go and update to the latest version of Arc OS. And the great thing about this is it's a very mature OS, so they've really managed to get maximum performance from the chipset, and Arc OS I think you will find is actually pretty configurable. And here it is. This has now been updated. One of the things I love about these is that sort of console-esque experience, and Arc OS is really simple, easy to navigate. Android systems are great, and I think they can be made in, Daigisho, and front ends like that can make it very console-esque, but this looks really good. But it does bring me to my first negative on this, and this is the lack of Wi-Fi. You can see all the artwork here. For any updates now, with over-the-air updates becoming so standard, having to plug this into your PC to download artwork and updates is a little frustrating. That being said though, let's take a look at the system actually working. And you can see here, the first thing that I really want to highlight is the screen. And you can see it really pops. And like I say, for the money, remember this is sub $40. The screen here, I think, is really crisp, really excellent in terms of clarity. Brightness is really good, the color depth is really good. I'm hugely impressed, and I'm playing the Mega Drive here, and you're going to find all 16-bit games run extremely well. However, this is another thing I do find, and this has been well documented, the D-pad is incredibly stiff, and so are the buttons, and I think you'll find that when you play a lot of these classic games, it's perfectly functional. It's not awful by any stretch of the imagination, but when I compare it with, say, the Mayu Mini's D-pad, it is far stiffer, and it certainly doesn't feel like as good an experience with 16-bit games from a control perspective. That being said though, the overall experience is perfectly functional for a $40 handheld. And if you just want to, if you're looking at just dipping your toes in for the first time, don't necessarily want to spend a huge amount of money, then this definitely gets the job done. Now, we talked about ArcOS being a very, very straightforward, clean interface. But another thing that I really like about this is the fact that if you want to, you can access the full RetroArch menu, which gives you a huge amount of tweaks and customizations to get things looking just the way you want. Let's use the Game Boy here as an example. You can jump into the menu settings. You can have that classic green dot matrix look. You can have the clean Game Boy Pocket look, as we're going to show here, or you can tweak things to have the Super Game Boy look. And being able to have these different options and functionality in all of the cores, giving you basically, it can be out the box, or you can take things a little bit further and tweak it and really get things looking the way that you like, which I was really impressed with, being able to do this on such a, and I keep coming back to the price, but a $40 handheld. It's great to be able to play with this and get comfortable with these settings. And like I say, for a first device, this is definitely something that people should consider. Now, the next thing that I always like to do with these systems is an input lag test. Now, this is not scientific, but I always find the Sonic 3 bonus stages to be something that I know where if you get any input lag, you really, really struggle with controlling this. And I have to say here, it's not bad. I think the stiffness of that Dpad and that has not helped. And I don't think it's as bad as perhaps it felt for me. It's certainly not as good as other devices like the 35XX or the Miu Mini, but it's playable. I'm sure if you played with the settings, and once you get used to the D-pad, this is going to be absolutely fine from that perspective. Now, the Sony PlayStation works extremely well. Most games play, in fact, all games I tried played absolutely perfectly. Now, again, the drawback of that stiff D-pad when you're playing tank games, I'm purposely showing Tomb Raider here, because when you're using that D-pad, the stiffness really did frustrate me a little bit. But performance-wise, this is excellent. And actually, for the PlayStation, that's where this system for me really, really starts to shine. And again, the reason is those dual analog sticks which have been included. If we take a look at, say, Toy Story 2 here, then the whole experience is massively enhanced by having that twin analog stick that the PlayStation supported. And in that, if you're a 90s kid like myself, it wasn't just about that 16-bit era. The 32-bit era and the early 3D was a huge part of that. And being able to recapture these games and have them so beautifully playable on a device, again, I keep going back to it, but this cheap, is really, really fantastic. And that's where this device really starts to shine. The playability of just including those two twin sticks is really, really excellent. Again, looking at Gran Turismo here, the controls really, really enhance the experience. And it means this really is a portable PlayStation. And with the feel and the comfort of it, it does feel really good. Now, one frustration I have is the R buttons and the triggers are a little clicky. And that's a little frustrating, especially when you start talking about the N64 and the Dreamcast. But the N64 really, really surprised me. I knew that this would run it, but I knew that there would be problems. Now, when you look at the emulation, yes, it's not massively accurate, but these games are playable. I made sure, I actually delayed this review to take a lot of time to play some games like Banjo-Kazooie here, and actually got a few levels in and very, very much enjoyed it. This runs great. It's, like I say, it's missing some of the bells and whistles that you would have from a modern system. Let's take a look at, say, frame buffer emulation. So if I pause this game here, you can see the fuzzy background where frame buffer emulation is not incorporated by default. But that's fine. That's actually okay. It doesn't really detract from the experience. And overall, I was super impressed by the N64. Even potentially some more taxing games. I mean, this may struggle with, say, Conker's Bad Fur Day, but things like Donkey Kong 64 was really, really playable and actually very, very enjoyable. Again, this is something that isn't really accessible on systems. Really you're looking at double the cost to have this sort of experience. You're looking at something like a Powkiddy RGB30, or I think the real next level up is the Retroid Pocket 2S, which that is a real step up. You've got hall sensor analog sticks, analog triggers, and a much faster GPU in there. The whole thing is a different experience, but this is playable. This really, really does work. And like I say, if you're new to this, you just want to get into it, see how much you're going to potentially play some games, this could be exactly what you're looking for. The Nintendo DS is another system that works great. It uses the Drastic emulator, which is extremely advanced, extremely mature, and by using the trigger buttons you can switch between the dual screens. You can have it full screen on one, both on the screen. Obviously games like Sonic Rush are going to be difficult, but you can see here from playing Mario, this runs perfectly well and is a perfectly competent DS system, which is surprising, to be honest. I wasn't expecting this sort of functionality from this device. And even astonishingly, the Dreamcast was pretty playable. Now, something like Shenmue or a racing game which uses the trigger buttons, they are just clicky. There's it's not the best experience, but it certainly works. And you can see from the footage here, it really does look great. And again, I was so surprised by this. I played it a lot more. I was like, is this really comfortable enough to play your games? And if we look at, say, Rayman II here, which is one of my favorite platformers on the Dreamcast, you can see it looks great. It runs great. This is a perfectly playable experience. Now, like the Nintendo 64, it's not an accurate experience. And I guess if you're just looking to play these games, that's okay. And if you're looking for an example as to why when I say this isn't accurate, what I actually mean, well, if you look at the sorting, now there's two options. There's the per strip, which uses far less resource, and you can see here that if you do it this way, you get graphical errors like on the back of the Hydro Thunder boat here, or per triangle, which obviously uses a lot more CPU intense, but far more accurate. But again, even Hydro Thunder, you can see here, it's playable. This works. It's possibly not the best way to play this particular game, but much of the Dreamcast library is accessible on a $40 device. So what's the conclusion here? Well, this device isn't for everyone. If, like me, you're a bit of an enthusiast, I'm probably not going to play this device much more, despite being hugely impressed by it. But if you are looking to dip your toe in, you're not sure how much you're going to actually play the device, so you don't want to drop a lot of cash, this may be a great starter system for people. Equally, if you have one of the more expensive systems and you're thinking, you know what, I want something that is pocketable, that if I'm going to drop or it's going to get damaged, I can use, this may be right up your street. So certainly I am hugely impressed at this price point of what this can do. And that's the thing about this system, really. It's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. 16-bit games and 2D early games are great. They run great, but it's let down by the stiffness of the D-pad and the buttons. And similarly, early 3D systems like PlayStation, N64 and Dreamcast, they run and they're perfectly playable, but there are concessions, there are issues with certain games. It's not going to be a perfect experience, but for the price, I don't think you can look much further. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please like and subscribe as always, and have a great day.